So welcome everyone. I'm Keith Crumwoody, Dean of Architecture at California College of the Arts. Thanks for joining us today for this interior design alumni conversation. At CCA, we understand land acknowledgement as a transformative act meant to confront our place on native lands and to build mindfulness of our present participation in colonial legacies. California College of the Arts campuses are located in Huichin and Yelamu, also known as Oakland and San Francisco, respectively, on the unceded territories of the Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who have continuously lived upon this land since time immemorial. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon indigenous peoples in California and the Americas, including their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their communities and culture. CCA honors Indigenous people, past, present, and future, here and around the world, and we wish to pay respect to local elders, including those on the lands from which you're joining us virtually today. Today's event is part of our Spring 2021 Architecture Lecture Series titled Remaking, through which we are reflecting upon the work we must do to remake our disciplines and co-imagine a just and equitable future. Today's event is also a part of a series of events this spring through which we're celebrating 100 cumulative years of interior design and architectural education at CCA, as our BFA interior design program celebrates its 50th anniversary, our Bachelor of Architecture program its 35th, and our Master of Architecture program its 15th. As part of this series, the chairs of each of the programs are hosting a panel discussion with distinguished program alumni. We began with the conversation with graduates of our Bachelor of Architecture program last month, and today we continue these events as Amy Campos and Katherine Lambert, current and former chairs of the interior design program respectively, joined 4 esteemed alumni in a discussion about their time at CCA and the work they're doing now. Please join us next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for a lecture by Ursula Krippa and Stephen Mueller of Agency. And on March 12th, the interior design program will host a discussion on the future of work, coordinated and moderated by Catherine Bakos. You can check out our full spring lecture schedule, along with stories by and about our students, faculty, and alumni at scaffold.architecture.cca.edu. And now I'll pass this over to Amy Campos.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Keith. So I'm the current chair of interior design. If you don't already know me, I've been in this role since 2018, and I've been part of the interior design program at CCA since 2009. It's really nice to see you all today and have a chance to connect virtually. So thank you for joining us. I'm thrilled to be part of this significant milestone for CCA's interior design program and for interior design education in general. 50 years is a long time in our field, and that timeline really translates to a huge community of people who have studied, taught, and engaged at CCA. The latest statistic I heard is that we're at almost 1,000 graduates of the program who are located all over the world in many related industries, in addition to leading the profession of interior design. The program was established officially 50 years ago as an environmental design program, though it's gone through a few name changes to interior architecture and most recently interior design, though the first interior decoration and design-oriented course shows up in CCA's course catalog from 1907-1908, which is a really long time ago. And while the name and structure has evolved, we've also remained focused on inspired interiors that positively impact the world, with a focus on sustainable material practices and spatial innovation. We'll see a broad spectrum of what that looks like in our alums' trajectories today. First, I want to talk a little bit about part of our larger efforts to celebrate the history and future of the program. So Katherine Lambert and I also spearheaded an effort to introduce the new Hank Dunlop Interior Design Scholarship to celebrate 40 years of contribution by our esteemed Professor Emeritus Hank Dunlop. We awarded our first 2 student recipients this fall, which is a true testament to the dedication of our community to raise enough funds to launch awards during this global pandemic. So thanks to all who continue to contribute to our student scholarships. We are so proud of every individual that has helped to build a more robust CCA interior design education and profession, and we are so excited for the cross-section of trajectories presented by our students, or by our students every day and our guests today. I'm going to pass to Katherine Lambert, current faculty and former chair, to introduce the conversation today.
Thanks, Amy. Welcome, everybody. It's so delightful to see all of you here today. And I just will say that I have been a professor at CCA in various capacities for 20 years, which is, in and of itself is a long period of time, and it goes quite fast. And I chaired the program for 7 of those years up until about 2011. But what I want to do is celebrate the panelists today and talk a little bit about why we're bringing everybody together. We've been talking about this as the future 50, although we all participated in the first 50 years. We take this celebratory year to pause, reflect, and focus on the future of CCA's interior design program today. Since all of our guests and many of our audience have participated in the program during different periods of our collective past, we have formed some open-ended questions to help all of us consider the future of our profession after we hear a bit from our guests. So I'm going to introduce a couple of them. It's in chronological order. Amy's going to do likewise, and then we're going to get into a little bit of their work and then a shared conversation. So I'd like to introduce Steffi Ohm. She has a CCA BFA in interior design from 2018. So just a few years ago, and she started a business right after she graduated. She's the co-founder and lead designer of Alter Interiors. And so Steffi is going to show us a few slides of her work, and then we will move on to Nicole. Thank you, Steffi, and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. One second. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I graduated CCA in 2018. I was working for an interior design firm with my current business partner for 2 years before venturing out on our own and started Alter Interiors. This is all work that was completed in 2019. It's mainly residential, all of it in San Francisco and in Golden Gate Heights and the Outer Sunset and Alamo Square in San Francisco. And then the pandemic hit and it was really slow. And like now we're really excited. We're getting some cannabis related commercial projects, which is really exciting. And I can't wait to get more into the commercial side of things. I think you can do much more with concept. I love residential, but commercial side is like, I think, very exciting to us because we haven't really done full projects in it. So that's just starting up. Yeah.
Thanks, Steffi.
Yeah.
Steffi, really quick before we move on, because I know I've had some interesting conversations with you about this idea of value-driven design. Could you talk just a little bit about that mission for your firm that you started?
Yeah. So sustainability is like at the core of our values. And we think it's like we didn't even have it up on our website because I think it's such a complex issue and like claiming something and there aren't really simple answers to things. So we I can pull it up. We kind of came up with these values that we started to think about flexibility, like in designing for this assembly, how permanent do we want things to be? Like we're thinking more of like how long of a timeline a space has. So is it really worth it to query and ship natural stone across the world if in 5 years somebody's gonna completely redo the thing, or layering like a base layer, then a semi-permanent layer, and then a layer that can be easily switched out because interiors you kind of want to switch them up. So like we're still working on it, but yeah, this is kind of how we started to think about sustainability, and it's been really good, I think. Yeah.
That's great. That's
Okay, terrific.
So happy to hear that.
And maybe I'll share. We started a furniture line. It's like kind of our answer to planned obsolescence, be like the forever table. It can go from 4 to 8 feet. It's still the prototyping stage, but like this is like, it's a desk size at 4 feet. And then it's this moving slat system that like eventually it will be going to 8 feet, but it could also be any size in between. So you could have that table in any possible scenario in the future. But yeah, so getting into that, but that's at the very early stages.
That's terrific, Steffi. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so Nicole Powell is our next panelist. She has a BFA in interior design from 2011, and currently she's the creative director at Partner Hero. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us. I'll give a whirlwind tour. I came into interior design in kind of a funny way. I had just received a bachelor's degree in history and felt like becoming an academic forever and ever and ever, just staying in the library for the rest of my life was a very real possibility, and ended up coming to CCA to get more into design and follow that path. And I think likewise, my career after graduating from CCA has been atypical, but always kind of with the underpinning of design thinking, which was truly the most valuable thing that I got from CCA, the ability to conceptualize and really bring meaning into the physical realm and into people's experiences. So I will share my screen. I have a smattering of things. I'm going to share the whole thing, which I know is not good Zoom habit. So when I got out of school, I started at Gensler in San Francisco. And I was primarily in the civic design practice area, but I did a lot of office spaces as well. So one of the first projects I worked on was the atrium at what's now Airbnb, which was a really fun project. Here's some of the renderings. I was also worked on the airport a lot, and I don't know, you guys might know Gensler's done a lot of the work at SFO. So from I think the yoga room in T2 was my first mini project version on that. And then I was part of the boarding area the boarding area E team with Melissa Mizell and Jeff Henry as the senior interior leads on this project. I'm trying to go fast. The other thing that I started getting into, Gensler has a lot of different types of studios, and I have a background in business writing and doing writing for other people, doing writing professionally. So I got tapped to do some design guidelines for SFO, and we thought that'd be really boring. So we made them this book to help kind of describe the repositioning that they were going through and to bring more texture and clarity to that, which is where I really got into doing more graphic design, more user research, and things like that, which has informed my career now. We did a lot of educational projects. I'm gonna just skip through these. We did, Moffett Library at Berkeley, UCBE. I actually got to teach some courses at UCBE with Melissa Mizell too, so that was really fun. And then, yeah, these are all the kind of smaller Dining by Design projects. You guys know about these, but we did a huge wide range of projects, but kind of always with the same process and same design thinking. I was also very distractible. So I did textile design, and I worked for California Home and Design for a while as a writer. I built a coffee bike when I moved to Boise. I think design has like touched every part of my life, even though it's been a little bit all over the place and a little bit bananas. And I've also just done a lot of branding for people, helped put together websites and learn that side. Now I'm a creative director for a business process outsourcing company that has a lot of sustainability and social justice mission pieces that I feel really strongly about. And unfortunately, none of the work that we've been working on over the last few months has been published. But just to give you an idea, coming into a company that has an established brand and like beginning to work towards like a new look and feel for them. And this is obviously a rough draft, but it's just kind of remarkable how just the design thinking piece of things and the ability to help people move through and solve problems from that point of view has translated into a lot of different career opportunities and a lot of interesting things. So that's it. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. That's great. That's terrific. So Amy, you want to introduce Susan?
Yeah. I love that, Nicole, your career path has like embraced so many aspects of your personality that I remember seeing when you were at CCA as well. It's really nice to see. So next we have Susan Collins, who graduated with a BFA in interior design in 2004. She is the co-founder and lead designer of Studio Collins Weir Interiors based in the Bay Area. And the other half of your practice is a CCA architecture grad, correct, Susan?
Yes. So I met my husband, Chris, my sophomore year. And now we're partners. So in life and in work, which is great. So I started CCA as an interior design student. I have an undergrad in studio art and art history. And when I was at CCA, I don't know if it's this way anymore, but interiors and architecture were merged together for the first 2 years. And so after my first year, I started interning at a great woman named Holly Holbert at her studio. Amy Elliott introduced me to her. And Holly's an architect who practices interior design. So I was working with her, and after my first year, decided to switch to the B-Arch, which was what was offered at the time, and figured that would allow me, my idea was that I could understand architecture and be able to speak that while would actually ultimately practice interiors, which was my interest. And looking back 20 years, it's all panned out. So, and I even got my husband, who's notoriously an architect in the Bay Area. We're partners now. And our focus is teaming up with architects and really working to understand what they've designed, what the site is, and who our clients are, and then working with them to build the interiors. So I will share my screen. Oh God, hold on. Make sure I have the right one up. And I just saved, there's 5 images of our work. There's more on our website. This is an image of a home in Marin County in Mill Valley. It was one of my first projects when I went out on my own 10 years ago with Adlin Darling Design, working with the client to bring warmth into their home. And it was a great project working directly with the client, which is my favorite part, and getting to know them, and then bringing warmth into this space, which is lined with steel and metal and concrete. And how do you take a client, they'd lived in their current home for 20 years, it was very traditional, like how do you bring them into this new way of living? And that's something I'm really interested in exploring in creating home for people. I'm trying to think if there's something else I should touch on. And I guess in this image and in this project, it was really about, and our work is about exploring soft furnishings as well as antiques or found objects. And this job, the client was really interested in the repurposing of materials, and the dining table is a reclaimed piece that we found in West Marin and had made, it has the chainsaw marks of the artist that had once used it for his table. So this piece here became the center of the home. This image is of a fairly recent project that we did in San Francisco with John Maniscalco Architecture for a wonderful client. And in this project, we work really closely with the architect in defining the materiality of the home and I guess, like what color are the slats that are lining the stair, and really working with them to define everything and rein in the palette so then it works holistically with our interiors. The table, the coffee table in this image was our first piece that kind of inspired the house for me. It's a piece by Vincenzo de Codis that we sourced, but it's 3 panes of glass in various shades. One's red, blue, and then one's kind of light green. It's what you make windshields out of is how he does it. But it provides this level of reflection in this house that is very geometric and square. So it's like a subtle way to bring organic forms into a very modern home. We also do a lot of custom furniture. So this is a pair of tables we call the split table. My partner, Chris, does most of the custom furniture, or like leads that part of the process. These are stainless steel, simple cubes. Again, like building on that idea of reflectivity, and the top is burnished or is sandblasted and the bottom is polished. So that you can see in the bottom left here where they start to reflect the rug and like carry the materials through the space. And we love working with all our local fabricators, and a lot of them are our peers from CCA. There's a lot of people we work with that have come through the furniture architecture program. It's really fun collaboration and having clients that are interested into this idea of exploration. This is the San Francisco Designer Showcase, which we were super honored to participate in 2 years ago. It's something I've always wanted to do. And it was at this beautiful building I've always loved in the city, Le Petit Trianon. So we did the living room, which was great to meet all the local interior designers and really get to know everybody, as well as participate with all our vendors, and the collaboration was really great on this design. And then this last image is a project we finished a few years ago in San Francisco. And I just included it because it's bright and playful, and I really love color right now. So this is a playroom on the top floor, and we designed the rug and worked with the mills and our vendor. We were inspired by a piece of Maharam fabric. So it's very much like something I feel like we would do in school almost, and that very much continues through our practice. But there was a colorway in a Sarah Morris fabric from Maharam, and we abstracted that and designed this rug for this huge room to add to the space. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Susan.
I'm gonna have to stop share. Hold on. Of course.
Okay, so next we have Tina Maness, who graduated with a BFA in, I believe, interior architecture in 1988, before the name changed. She is an architect and owner of Tina Maness Associates in New York, among many other things, and hopefully she'll touch on a number of different roles she's had. Go ahead, Tina.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for including me in this. I guess I've taken a very different trajectory than a lot of the other graduates. I was fortunate to actually take Hank Dunlop those many years ago, but I did start in interior design, and then started working in architecture, which led me to this kind of obsession with space and the body and wellness. And I eventually, after traveling across Europe and working for OMA and Richard Rogers, et cetera, kind of went from large, big buildings to residential work, and eventually hospitality and wellness. So my trajectory has been a little bit different, but I'm currently now in these times rebranding myself, looking at what practice can be after all these many years. You know, how do we begin to blend what we've learned, what we've kind of absorbed, and looking at the future in a new way. So the current explorations are really about the permanence of impermanence, or the impermanence of permanence, the body in space and wellness. And so soon you'll see some form of a new website called White Box. And in that, I really explore working in deeper collaboration with my clients for the possibilities of what's to come and how to accommodate for them. I do interiors, both furniture and then of course architecture. It's mostly on the inside, but at the moment doing some larger constructions, a house in Westchester, New York from the ground up, an addition in Berkeley, and my practice has now spanned both coasts. So in this life of COVID, I can take you through a few. In this life of COVID, I feel really fortunate that I can move seamlessly because of technology and take with me the same values that I've always practiced with, you know, the idea of intimacy, collaboration, really looking at space as harmony of the body, and looking at each opportunity as an individual thing, not my style or my ego, but really what is the project about? What does it want to be? And what is its kind of optimum performance for the experience of the user? So I kind of don't know what else to say other than I continue to explore ways of practice and collaboration with my clients intimately. And there's no real limitations on, is it hardscape? Is it softscape? Is it furniture? Is it, what is it? We've even gone to do light fixtures and clothing, and it's just really what a client base is. Recently finished actually an installation for a collection of over 3,500 books combined with 1,500 religious folk art pieces. So how do you begin to look at that exchange and create something new? That's really where my practice lies.
Is that collection for a private, like a residence, or for a public
It
space?
is. It is a
Wow.
private residence. Maybe one day I'll get to put some posts up for that, but it's been super interesting because how do you curate? You know, we talk so much about space and the organization of space, but you really realize that it scales down to the hand, right? That's what we're taught in some ways, the detail. And so in that particular project, how do you reorganize a collection that's so vast and have it give meaning? Like space gives meaning, like light and air. And so it's an interesting, it was an interesting challenge, and the client was really fantastic. And so similarly, the house that I'm working in Westchester, it's a new client, and we're looking at how does COVID shift and change two working parents at home, because the feeling is that it won't go away, and what an opportunity to define a new way of living within the home. So it's a space of learning, of collaboration, of family, of friends, of work, of exercise, right? And so that's becoming a real drive in this project, and how we negotiate the use of space and flexibility without overbuilding, for instance. So I think I'll stop.
That's such a nice way of describing what we do. It really is such a privilege, the sort of diverse range of people we get to intersect with in this profession. And I love the way you talk about that relationship with your clients. So we're going to open it up. Katherine and I have a few questions just to prompt the conversation, but we're happy to sort of let it veer and flow as you guys want. I know sometimes students are a little bit shy to jump in with the first question, but please do. You can use the chat. You can also just unmute. We're a small enough group today that you're welcome to unmute and chat with us. But we'll start off with our first question for our panelists, which is, what was an unexpected opportunity in your trajectory that really changed, you know, the way that you imagined what your career would be? Could you recount some opportunity like that came your way?
I can tell you an opportunity that gave me my career. I actually was studying law at a city college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do and started getting interested in the history of interiors. And Betty Wilson, who graduated from CCAC many years before, wasn't a professor, and she submitted my work unbeknownst to me to CCA, and I got a scholarship. She encouraged me to go. And I thought it was such an incredible act of generosity. And funny enough, years later, of course, I taught for many years, and I had a student send me a note saying, "Thank you so much for changing my trajectory. I was in interiors and I ended up going into architecture because you showed me what a woman could do in practice." So I was very touched by that. But ironically, I was taking the ferry and I ran into Betty Wilson. It was something like 15 years later. And so I had the opportunity to thank her. And that to me was sort of her belief in me and what I could do shifted my whole life to pursue a voice, to pursue explorations and adventure, living across the world, doing all aspects of design. And I think that we don't recognize as teachers or as practitioners how we do touch other people. And so I think that's a kind of wonderful story of gratitude that I like to share.
Very moving. Thank you for sharing that, actually. That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it was starting a business, which I hadn't planned on pretty much right out of college. Just the opportunity presented itself. My business partner and I work together. We've known each other for a very long time. We work very well together. And it was purely circumstantial that I did that. And I feel like through that, there were so many moments where we were like, what are we doing? How, like, we haven't experienced many other processes of how businesses are run. And I feel like now we're at a point where we're like, okay, we can design our business in a way and set up processes that give us the output so it's been really fun. I've never necessarily thought of myself as a business person, quite the opposite, but like I've been positively surprised at like how fun it is to set up the back end and how much that sets you up for the actual projects that you then implement and do. So yeah, that's been really unexpected actually, like, because yeah, I didn't align myself with business at all.
So what was the opportunity that came up? So you were working in another firm with your partner, your now partner, business partner.
Yeah, and we were very lucky that it was a really small firm and it was like a sink or swim situation. So we were so lucky to get these responsibilities like pretty while I was still at school. So the learning curve was enormous for me at the beginning. And then, I don't know, I think it's good to switch things up too. I think like 2 years is a good amount to do something. I feel like with a business, you can switch positions, you can do, but I think like after 2 years or like 4 years, but it felt like a natural point to do the next step. And we were like, we want to work together. We had a client. So we were like, why not? It was kind of in a way, like on a whim. And then we kind of started it, and that's that. Yeah.
I like how you said how you designed your own business. And I could really tell when you got into those core values and those things that were key and you wanted to hold on to those as you were starting your business. I think that's so important from the very beginning to articulate that and not let it just become client driven. So that's really great to see that.
I was going to say, one of the first projects I worked on at the beginning, it was actually in the recession around 2010. So there wasn't a lot of work at that time. And I was very fortunate. But one of the things, having been in, in San Francisco working in the community for so long, was I had a lot of friends and vendors that were looking for work and interested in collaboration and exploring design. And was put on a project. I got in the city for a client who was renovating an apartment, with a beautiful apartment, and she wanted the whole thing green, allergy free, all these things. It was really, because it was just me exploring, local makers and upholstery workers who could build these green objects, and then also pushing, the client was really interested in pushing very simple but like custom rugs and interesting ways of making. So I think back then, like 10 years ago, it was just working with people, relationships that had made, since my time at CCA, and it really let me understand what I could do as an interior designer, and like what I want to do as far as what decoration is for me. Was great.
I love that you highlighted the collaborative relationship with the client, that the client actually also participated in kind of pushing you to explore things as a designer, and that's great.
Yeah, it's my favorite part. The clients are like my favorite, one of my favorite parts of the process. It's great.
The thing that comes up for me, and I touched on this a little bit, is being willing to take on projects that aren't beautiful or fun. And I'm not talking about like, projects that need a lot of renovation, but I think the guidelines I brought up is a perfect example where someone was like, no one really wants to do this. And looking at it and saying like, is there an actual design opportunity here? And I think when we did that with I keep calling them guidelines, that book that we made, it kept growing because you start to build value and you start to have a conversation with people and you start to bring the narration to life. And I think this is applicable, across many disciplines. But it's like almost in a funny way, a lot of my best opportunities have been like projects no one else wanted, and being willing to be like, I bet we could make it cool. It's like, that's like the challenge of being like, we're design people, so we can like actually take something that is not a great experience traditionally and make it really wonderful, which in a funny like other way, that's kind of what an airport is, right? People are like, oh, airport, like, ooh, like, that's really exciting. But the SFO projects were really amazing, and it was a great client and everything. But yeah, I think being willing to get into things that are like not exciting can be really fruitful.
Being an opportunity, that's really a skill that a lot of people should cultivate. I think it's really wonderful that you brought that up and put that forward for us to consider. What did your education mean to you? And this is for anyone who wants to jump in. And what did you value about being at CCA?
Wow.
No small questions here.
Not a small, I think it's a great question. I mean, to me, education is absolutely everything, because knowledge is the window to the limitless, infinity, right? So for me, CCAC was my first glimpse into another world, right? Where college, it's not about what you should learn, it's about what you're passionate about. And for me at that time, it was the ability to throw my passion out there and not be beholden to somebody else's definition of what my voice was in design and what my trajectory should be, but rather how far could I go? It's like running until you drop and get up and run again. And it was just a whole new lease on life at that time for me, and still is actually. Two of the things that were said earlier, designing your own business, and also this idea of constraints, where constraints are just opportunities, right? And now we're in a place where we can define anything we want to be and how we want to practice. I ended up doing my yoga teacher training for 200 hours because I got so involved in wellness. And now that is becoming something that's informing my practice. And I wouldn't have been able to do that and work with my clients in that way if I hadn't had the rooting of the individual point of view, of the individual voice in design. So for me, CCAC really gave me that opportunity. And it's been the kind of kryptonite that I take with me, you know, the thing that I hold valuable inside, and also what I give to my students. I always say, you know, it's not about really what I think. I can guide you, but you've got to find your voice and stand behind it and be brave about that. So for me, that was the thing I walked away with, and I still have it today. It was really fantastic.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
For me, it was pretty recent that I was in school, and I always had an affinity. I studied photography. I always had an affinity for art, and like thought I had a good eye. I love music, but CCA really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it was endlessly frustrating actually to me at the beginning, because like my spatial abilities, my conceptual abilities, I think my philosophy and like my conceptual abilities in concept were there, but I didn't know how to implement it. So like I knew what I wanted to do or what I wanted to think to do, but I didn't know how to get there in the first few semesters. And then like after halfway through, like something clicked, and like I found a way to make these decisions in a way that made sense to me. And that was and I don't think that would have happened for me otherwise. Like it was that program really, in the way it was structured, that I work like this every day now. Like I kind of develop my way of thinking about things in a way that makes sense. Even if it just makes, I don't even tell people about it, but it just makes sense in my head.
I
Yeah.
love that. I mean, the way you described your practice first, and then the way you just described your CCA experience are almost like parallel descriptions, which is really wonderful to hear. Yeah. The way of working rather than the outcome of the work is really the takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I feel what Steph does about like that. It pushed me in a way, like I'm very pragmatic. I was raised very pragmatically. Like I always wanted to do design. I always wanted to be an architect, and my whole family said no, like no, no, no. You need to do whatever, which I obviously never did. But I always wanted to go to art school, and it was a great opportunity to come to California and get out of New York. But it was also, once here, like taught me a way of looking, like giving me a voice, and also teaching me like to ask questions. And I asked a lot of questions, and gave me the fundamentals of a design process through the studio work and exploration. And that's just invaluable. So I think asking questions is, people, you know, forget that, or once you come into the workspace, you know, in your job, you think you need to know everything, but the truth is you don't know everything, and asking questions is the way you're going to learn.
And make opportunities, to Tina's.
And make opportunities, exactly. Like you learn, you ask questions, and then you know, you're finding solutions and asking more questions, and that's what I think makes great designers.
Being inquisitive and opening up.
Exactly. Yeah. Opening it up, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like pulling a loose thread or something. You never know, like, where that's going to really pull out a whole new set of opportunities. And until you have the conversation or you ask the question, you know, your network of people, your community doesn't necessarily know what you're after, interested in. But once you ask those questions, people start to understand and start to support you, and, you know, offer you opportunities.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities. It's amazing, possibilities.
If you just open your arms and grab them, some are going to come into your lap. So that's the best way. Question.
Exactly.
Seek.
It was actually Amy, you, like at the beginning, like stripped a lot of my assumptions away of what I thought design
You made it through to the other side.
What?
I'm glad you made it through to the other side.
No,
I'm glad it worked.
all my preconceptions were kind of taken from me, and I didn't really know what to. Yeah. And then I remember you told me about a performance piece. It was a dinner party, and the designer had designed the soup
The long spoons.
too long to feed yourself with. So like, it was a space that through its design had its own rules, and that kind of was eye-opening to me of what design could really do be. And like then, yeah, I feel like that was a turning point. It was that soup spoon.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I think like what Nicole was talking about too is like taking on the things that maybe initially seem like they're not traditionally what you would think of as good opportunities, and not sort of overlaying that value on opportunities before you take them on is really interesting, because I do think like we have a huge amount of impact we can make in the world, and it requires like joining conversations or taking on tasks that maybe we aren't as familiar with, and being confident to know that the design skills we have and the ways of thinking or approaching not problems, but opportunities in the kind of ever evolving rotation of the world is really exciting, and to be confident in that is so important. I feel like that's the main thing we're trying to communicate to our students.
Yeah, they always think of us as problem solvers, but we're opportunity makers in many ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think one time I gave a lecture, I was shocked. I was asked to speak at the AIA of Central Pennsylvania. Who knew? And they asked me at the end, how do you get your clients to do what you get them to do? You must be so demanding. And it's actually quite the opposite, right? It's really more about looking at the possibilities of every project. Every project has constraints. Every budget or every project I've worked on has had a budget, right? And we could let that scare us, or we could set that aside and say, I can be responsible here, but let's look at what's possible, right? Let's look at the way we can redefine or explore or discover within this constraint opportunity, right? And you make it happen. You don't, I think that what I've seen in the many years of practice is so much about the architect's ego. And we all have an ego because we have to be confident in what we're putting down, right? That's fine. But I really do believe that better relationships and better architecture and space. And there was one question that came up from David, advice about navigating the intersection of architecture and design. It's really paying attention and looking at opportunities and understanding not just the technology of how we make space, but the body in space and the collective body in space and the light, the air, all those things make life good, right? Make architecture good. And so the idea that the ego is the right way to go has always kind of turned me off. And I see now that we're going a lot more towards the sort of collaboration, the joy of space, and the process of making in a very communal way. And I think that's great. So in terms of his question and advice is, I really think taking into account, all the pieces that make technology, hand, light, air, client, and seeking those opportunities within the constraints. Shouldn't look at it as one or the other, right? Design is design, and we should have the knowledge and the education to put that hat on as designers and tackle a coffee cart, which I love. That was fantastic. Or a expanding table, or reclaimed items. I just think we shouldn't limit ourselves to thinking inside outside for architecture and interiors.
Yeah, in a way, like we're motivators, right? Like we we have to frame opportunities in a way that all of the other people that we work with can get on board. Like, I love that Susan talked about the fabricators and kind of artists that she works with, or contractors or clients, or, you know, your team, people working above you, under you, with you. I think our role as motivators of being able to see opportunity and to frame it in a way that can be taken on and pursued is a really important part of what we do, right?
Yeah. Nicole, do you want to share anything, or before we move on to our next question?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said something about just conceptual thinking and helping people navigate through a story. But I think the other two things that were really critical were like being good at getting like scrappy and like learning how to fail. For me, like a lot, like iteratively fail, and being like really comfortable with making something that's not good. And that's helped me like I think become a better designer, being really iterative like that, but also like being someone who can lead other people through the design process by just being like, come on, this is a safe place. Like, let's start with our worst ideas, let's start with the craziest thing you can think of. And like getting, because I think there's like a legacy of like a very pristine kind of imagination about what interior design is. And there's this huge vernacular about like who has access to interior design, like who can afford it, like who is it for. And so I love the scrappiness piece and getting comfortable with making things that aren't beautiful and then working on them and working on them and working on them, or scrapping them. I'm a big advocate of failure, I guess, until we get it right. And so that's been really like remarkably valuable. And I remember, I'll share this one small anecdote when we had to like work with all the aviation teams and facilities people at SFO to be like, hey, we're gonna do some really different stuff. We had to go through a series of visioning sessions and like breaking down the walls and just being like, let's talk about some really out there ideas, and then probably where we'll get is somewhere a little bit, in between these two worlds. But like that building the trust and relationship is required everyone to just start to feel comfortable with like failing, having stupid ideas, having crazy ideas. And I love that. And I think CCA was a crash course in that, partly because of the learning curve, but also, you guys, I think we got really good at that scrappiness.
I'm sure the students will love hearing that, because they're all thinking right now, oh, it feels like nothing but failures. But failures are nothing but just your road to getting to where you want to go, right? And experimenting.
Yeah, exactly right.
Serious. Like, I'm not saying it because it's a cute thing to say. Like, I really, like, I just love starting with something that's not possible, or I don't know. Sorry, I know people say that and I feel like, oh my gosh, I sound like one of those talking heads who says that, but then is really like perfectionist. I'm like, no, for real. So it's good. It's good practice.
Well, so we also wanted to know from you all, aside from your kind of takeaways from CCA and these opportunities that present themselves in your career so far, we're interested in how you see yourselves situated in the field in the future, like based on what experiences, what education, what values or issues will be important to you in the future as you continue your trajectories forward.
I'm good. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say, I think the past years, obviously, like we do mostly residential design. It's my passion. We have some commercial work. The past years really shifted things. It's been a lot of unknown. I think it's also, and we've been very fortunate to be incredibly busy this whole time, because I think people are reevaluating home. And it's been mentioned, like, the multi-programs of home, right? Like kids, kids at home, you're teaching, you're working, and how do you create space for people and what's comfortable. So I don't know, I'm really interested in what in design and how this is going to overlay as everyone, thankfully is getting vaccinated and people are going to start going back into the workspace. Like, what is the workspace now? What are these huge buildings going to be like? How is it going to transform, the landscape and of the commercial spaces as well as the homes, and what people are going to prepare for as we move forward? And so it's interesting.
It's such an important point, Susan. I just started doing a workspace for a new client. They're a media invention company, and they need a space to collaborate, but they don't want to have set workspace. And we're in the process of discussing, what does that mean, and what is the experience that people need to have there, and how do we enhance that in design while making it flexible, while making it affordable, and especially while making it safe, right? Like, how do you create meeting spaces that allow distancing, or at the inverse, intimacy of collaboration? And it's a good challenge. Living in New York now part-time, Midtown Manhattan is just a vast oasis of office space. And the big question of all these, real estate people, how do we go from $150 a square foot to $44 a square foot and maintain a kind of vibrance in the city? And you can see it. You can see the city change. I think it's going to be very interesting for all the hoopla and hyperness we had about workplace a year ago, 2 years ago, right? And what that meant and the invention of that. And now it's all turned on its head and we're reinventing again. And that's coming into the residents, into homes, into all sorts of spaces like banks and cafes and restaurants. And what does that mean? And so it's a hard challenge. I think the real estate community in some way is going to have to be flexible enough to keep up with the designers that invent it,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm at a point in my life I feel extremely privileged in the sense that I now work for myself. I keep my team small. I keep few projects, and that's purposeful so that I can really focus on doing the work that I want to do. I think when you're out there getting experience and you're in the corporate world or you're trying to pursue your own practice, it's so much about get the work and you'll get it done. And that's great, right? Because how many iterations do you get those 10,000 hours, Amy, that we were talking about earlier, right? But there's a certain point, I think, where I felt I started losing touch with that one-to-one design, started going to people working for me, and then you get involved in the management. And now I've scaled far back so I can have just the pleasure and the passion of what I do as a designer selfishly as mine, right? And keep the team small and the projects few so I can do that. And so I can explore some of these newer meanings. So for me, the future is really about the calibration of that and the exploration of that, and really kind of understanding all the potentials that exist with the liberations we have. Some people say Corona is a confinement, and in many ways it is, but we have to remember technology is a liberation and flying is a liberation. We don't have to have that workspace in the same way. So how can that begin to inform practice and begin to reach out to clients that you really connect with? That's, for me, the future is kind of pulling in those technologies and pushing it through the lens of collaboration and wellness and sort of, I think, impermanence and permanence.
Thank you, Tina. That, again, very moving how you've put all those pieces together, and I think really important for us. I resonate with certain things that you're saying for certain.
Yeah. It's a luxury.
What about you, Steffi and Nicole? What's next for you? What are the things you have your eyes on, values you're thinking about right now?
I think we're just building them. We're trying to putting them into the company and like more into processes, and also like now we're getting ready to hire. So like thinking about leadership, which I've never really thought about, but like how do you set somebody else up to succeed in a way that you want the design done. And then something like in the future, like in-house production would be like that level of experimentation would be really interesting for us. And a consulting arm, like we've had a project in like Novato, really small home. They couldn't afford an interior designer. We looked at it, but they were like, would you like to consult on it? And it was just from a functionality perspective, like we were like, you know, add 2 sliding doors, you double your living space, and like it was kind of like giving a class almost. And it was something aesthetically that we would have never done. Like we didn't advise at all on what items to buy. We're just like, get a console that's like 16 inches deep and this high, and then a stool that you can sit at it, and just like setting parameters around the items. And it really like, they're so happy. They moved in, it was a full renovation. And I really enjoyed that process, even though personally, aesthetically, I wasn't that excited about the aesthetics of it, but like the process of doing that. And I think that takes the elitist thing out of design too, if you're like, because there is, for residential design especially, there's a huge price tag attached to it. And I think like design on some level doesn't even have to do anything with aesthetics. It's just functionality. So I would love to explore that area a little bit.
I think I lost track of the question a little bit, but what was on my mind when you were asking it was just that I feel like there's a sea change happening. I think a lot of people feel this way, and that society's perspective is shifting, and the opportunity to connect with people and say like, how do you want to live? I mean, I think it's the same thing that we're all doing, not what do you want it to look like, but how do you want to live? How do you want to feel? I think that the world, that more people are understanding that design is this way of speaking, and it's a language that even if you don't speak it, you understand it. And so being able to tap into that growing awareness, I think has been really exciting, from the project scale, but just from also being in the world as a designer. People recognize more and more the importance, not just in architecture and interiors, but everywhere, seeing how designers are storytellers, experience makers. It feels like design is getting bigger and more accepted as like a really critical role, which is something I see from the beginning of my career to now, entering an interior designer even 10 years ago, the kind of expectations people had about who you were, what your proficiencies were, etc. That's changed a lot. So I'm excited for that, because that's the stuff I like. So
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point. Past 5 or 6 years, I'm a pop culture fanatic, right? Who isn't, I guess, but there's been such a huge consumption of what design is, right? And everybody thinks they're a designer, and many people are, and that's great, and more power to them, right? But the hyper consumption has fought out the war of must-haves, right? I have this and I have that, and look, oh, they have that. I want that in my home. As a designer, as a true designer, I'm not really interested, and this may sound horrible, but I'm not really interested in taking a checklist and saying, okay, here's your Gucci, here's your Tesla, here's your boom, 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 here's your project. I'm really interested in pulling people out of what you should have into what is the experience you want to have? How do you live? Not how did they say you should live? How do you work? Not what is the best way for you to work? And those are some of the questions that I really dig in with my clients, because I think that that's the difference between consumption of design and being a designer. Working through what the real meanings are, you know, the multiple failures, the multiple tests, the understanding that they want to have something, but they're not really sure what. You know, I think that for me, that's something that is so important to part of my practice, and what I really endeavor to do to make the project be the client and the client be the project. You know,
Yeah.
so I wanted to say it's a great point, Nicole.
That's a great lead into our final question. And I want to save a little bit of time for our audience as well. So the last question is, what advice would you give our students to best be able to take advantage of those opportunities that will present themselves in their futures?
I would start by saying there's a lot of opportunity right now. I mean, everybody is hiring. Like there's a lot of opportunity across the board right now in design. And I think really talking to a lot of different firms that are practicing in different ways, and asking questions in those interviews. Obviously, like the studio is interviewing you and wants to understand who you are, but I think it's really important when you go into those to really explore what different practices are doing in the area where you know, the region where you want to land, and ask questions when you're talking to those studios about what they're doing and what their interests are as well. Because I think, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity out there right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This is the one regret, so to speak, I have, is that I didn't have a chance. I didn't take the chance of like working for other firms. And I think it's so interesting what other firms are doing, the type of work they're doing. I'm so far away from it. I don't think I'll ever be done learning. But yeah, even like the idea of an internship in some architecture firm sounds really appealing to me. I think like taking in as much different experiences as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say be brave. Be brave and connect to your passions, but don't think I can't do this. Think, how might I do this? Don't put limitations on yourself. Again, I feel like the old lady of the group, which is fine.
I'm with you.
You know, it's like when I graduated from Columbia, I did my master's at Columbia, and when I graduated, it was a dead recession, right? Total opposite of now. But I ended up applying for every possible fellowship and et cetera. And I went to Japan. I worked in Japan. I worked in England. I worked in the Netherlands. I went to Russia. I did a fellowship in the Czech Republic. And I came back and I felt like I lost all this time. And I forgot to look at what I had gained, right? So don't think of losses. Don't think of, if I do this, I can't do that. Just look at the opportunity and be brave for yourself, because, you know, it is about passion. It is about putting yourself out there in the world and exploring. And if you don't do that, you'll never really find your voice in design, right? And so whether you start out and do your own, you know, business immediately, you know, that's your passion, that's your exploration, that's incredibly brave, right? Is equally as it is going to work for, I don't know, Gensler or whoever it is going to be, right? But just don't let fear be your kind of work.
Yeah, to what Tina's saying, I remember I was, you know, I said earlier, I switched from interiors to architecture. And ultimately, though, my goal was just to do interior design. And I kind of was getting pigeonholed in running very interior architecture jobs because I was great at, I was good at it and I loved it, but I always wanted to do the soft furnishing. So I had my hands a little bit and everything. And I tried to switch, like, I don't know, pretty far. I'd been at the firm maybe 8 or 9 years, and I interviewed. I remember interviewing for a residential design firm, and I remember him calling me back and being like, well, we would put you on the IA side of it. And I was like, no, I just want to do soft furnishings. Like, it's all I wanted to do. But it became clear that it was really hard for me to like push to take that next step to a firm that really focuses on that. And that's one of the reasons I ultimately took the leap and went out on my own to do just interiors. So my thing is like, know what you want and take the risk. Like Steffi doing it right out of school is great and super brave. I didn't have that risk. I didn't have that in me. It's great.
I have like more practical things maybe, or what seem practical. One is to get really good at loving what you make, but also being willing when it doesn't work or people don't like it, to get instead of doing this and becoming sad, withdrawn, to get deeply curious about why people don't love it, and to get really good at talking to people about your work, and knowing, like getting really good about knowing like, no, it's gonna stay this way because this is what I want, and being able to say, all right, like, yeah, let's talk about how we can evolve it with clients and with everyone. And so I think it's like that's a constant practice of ego stuff, that everyone does differently. But I think being defensive is actually a really it's such a bummer way to work through your career, because there's a lot of hurt feelings when there could just be a really good conversation, and your design often gets better. And so when something's not working, I tend to be like kind of interested, like, ooh, why is it not working? I mean, I like that user research piece of it, and that's with all designs. The other thing is, I think architecture firms, interior design firms can swallow people sometimes. And so I really, I recommend perspective, rest, knowing what you are going to make. Like for a presentation, for instance, I really love making a cartoon of the pieces to make, not making all the things and then picking pieces from them, because I'm just, again, a big proponent of rest and not sleeping under your desk. Like it doesn't make your work better, or that was my experience. We all do it sometimes because like whatever, poor planning and stress is a perverted relationship with time is what they say. But I think understanding what you're going to make is really helpful, and also understanding that, like, I always joke that it was this funnel of specificity, that you start big and wild and hairy, and then it gets more and more and more specific. So that's working maybe in a big firm. Like, don't get caught up in it. And lastly, like, people are more accessible than you think. I think that's the last thing. And then, when you do something, you're like, oh, I finally won the award, and I got published, and then you're like, oh my God, like I still don't know the things. There's never a place where you know all the things, right? You're always, so it's nice to remember that, because it makes it easier to talk to people.
Mm-hmm. So enjoyed talking to all of you, and we want to save a few minutes to have some questions. Oops, I'm not, okay, good. A few minutes to have some questions from the audience. So let's see, why don't we open it up? And you can also put them in the chat. Somebody trying to talk to me, here we go.
Well, I was gonna say, I think we've addressed the questions that were already in the chat, but if we haven't, please unmute and just put them forward again if there's something about your question we didn't quite get to.
Is there anybody out there in the audience who has a comment or question they want to ask any of our panelists? Don't be shy. You can pipe right in and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I love that, Tina. Right now is an opportunity.
Don't be afraid to talk to others. You know, you can learn so much in just that interface. Yeah.
Well, I guess
No
I guess
question?
I'll go ahead. I think you sort of touched on, I think, addressing again the intersection between, say, architecture and interior design, and that there really isn't really an intersection; they're one of the same. And to those ends, is there anything? Again, this could, I guess anyone can answer this, but are there certain tenets that you'd say make up good design that you happen to have picked up from CCA, be it from like the process that you've essentially come up with within any project, or the actual, you'd say, final output that you actually produce? Yeah, that's it.
That's a tough
Thank
one.
you. Yeah, that is a tough question.
Well, I think process is everything, but
Yeah.
for me, it's like I feel like I can never stop. The thing that makes me stop a phase is that I have to move on to the next phase, or I have to get this built, or I have to, right? There's so many, it's complicated. There's no formula, you know, there's no right thing.
I was going to say too, I think it's like creating your own formula, right? Like, so the tools that you're using, learning at school. I remember this is really silly, but I remember, I think it was Amy Elliott. I don't know. So one of my teachers being like, clean your desk, like you need to organize your desk and then I'll come back and talk to you. And I was like, what? And then it's very true. You learn this in work too. It's like that simple skill of like organizing your workspace or where you're creating, as messy as it is and everything going on, like establishing order then helps your process. So I think it gets into the idea of presentation and how you're pinning up your presentation. All these little things you're doing, and you're staying up all night and you're exhausted, and then you're like pinning it all up on the wall. But the ultimate goal is like the presentation. I don't even know if anyone pins up on the wall anymore, but like how you're pinning it up and how you're presenting the order, that the rules of like order that you're creating, and that all starts to apply to the workflow that you'll have in your professional practice, be it at home doing something sculptural and conceptual, or like working in a big studio like Gensler.
It's true. Like those rules of organization are essential in conveying your voice. Like sometimes I've seen so many people pin up. I mean, I taught for over 10 years, right? So many students pin up these ideas and there's no story, there's no cohesiveness, there's no organization. So whether you're pinning up in school or presenting to a client or even reviewing for yourself, be organized about it. Really critique what it is that you're putting up there and the linkages between one element of the next in order to make it stronger, make it clearer. And if something's missing, don't be afraid to fill it in. There's also this loss, I think, of just sketching, like plain old sketching. And, you know, we're so wrapped up in the technology of the perfect presentation, the InDesign, the renderings, all of that, which is great and it's powerful, but don't be afraid to sketch out an idea live. Sometimes I put together these elaborate presentations, and then the things that resonate maybe the most are those hand sketches when I'm really in dialogue with the client. And that is part of the process. And I think in some ways it gets a little lost, you know, but it should be part of our daily language of how we think. You know, sometimes I'm walking and I'm grabbing my sketchbook to make some weird scroll, but that little scroll is the diagram and the seed of an idea, you know, so don't lose those tools. And to answer that question, I'm really loving SketchUp right now. Somebody's asking about software. It's a great tool. It's a great tool but it's not the only tool.
Can I second the sketching? A lot of, people love individuals who can sketch too, even from like firms looking at candidates. I think a lot, when I was at CCA, students really discounted sketching, like, oh, no one does that. Everyone's using software. I have to know Revit. And unless you want to be a BIM manager, like you don't need to know every piece of Revit. And I like, know the base tool, CAD is great. SketchUp is great. Revit's, they're all great tools. It doesn't take that long to get proficient, like basically proficient in any of them. But if you can sketch, you're like gold, man, because like sketches are beautiful and ephemeral and fun, and they can be fast, and they give people like a feeling of what a space is without trying to like show them a cartoon, like a graphic cartoon. And people, it's so valuable because it shows that you can think like a designer. And so if you're thinking like, what software do I need to be proficient at? I would say like, do 10 sketches in your sketchbook every day, and you'll be like, you'll have a skill that differentiates you from the crowd. The other thing is I use SketchUp as in working sessions, which a lot of people don't like to do. They like to say like, here it is, which is also a great thing to do. And I also do that sometimes, but I also often am like, I don't know, let's look at the SketchUp model. We'll push some stuff around and we'll like get you to see what it's like to be in there. And I always preface that with, it's a cartoon. It's not the real thing, so don't be nervous. I think tools are important, but they are not the most important thing. Get good at them, but you don't need the whole tool set. Unless you want to be a manager, then you do.
In our practice, we use SketchUp really, we like everybody from myself, which no one likes it when I go in the SketchUp model because I'm too organic, but like we use SketchUp to design, like to work on scale and space and custom furniture pieces. It's like a really dynamic tool in our studio. It's super simple, it's super easy to use, but then you can export it into other programs and create beautiful renderings. And it really helps us curate and define our jobs. So we're definitely looking for a strong technical skill set for the designers that we're bringing in the studio, as well as like, and then having the ability to like step out and sketch on your paper over that, or sketch by hand and like print things out, because I agree, like you have to get out of the computer. Otherwise your head's just spinning, and we have a lot of that right now with Zooming and people working remotely. It's like getting people to go for hikes or just get out of the computer. Like I'm a proponent of that as well. So I think, yeah, hand sketching is like an art form and it's great, but having a toolkit of basic Adobe, knowledge of basic Adobe and SketchUp and then CAD is important, like important baseline on your resume, those skills.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was just gonna say like I really like, doing a plan in CAD and printing it out and doing test fits as a sketch on trace over it, especially if you're going into a working meeting with a client or other designers, because it's so versatile to be able to slip trace on top of trace and move things around. And I think knowing what tools work best for what things is actually like the secret sauce, and being able to do it that way, not getting stuck in a tool.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I was dictated by the tools at the beginning of CCA. But now it's just like they all sort of do the same thing. So whether it's AutoCAD or Rhino or SketchUp, like it's all like basic programs. But like, yeah, if I relate to how stressful it is if your graphic representation for school presentation isn't on par with your own expectations, and I was bogged down and like really bummed out by that. But like it'll come along like automatically.
I think what you're all maybe saying is that the tools are really reinforcing an ability to be at times precise, at times loose, at times communicative and conceptual, at times like tight and detailed. And I think the suite of like precision drawing, loose drawing, and three-dimensional imaging, whatever format that might take, it seems like the core kind of skills, not necessarily the specific softwares, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. It's the intention, right? And the thoroughness and the like, to me, what I look for in somebody, anybody can learn a program, but how you use that tool is what becomes really important.
Right.
You know, AutoCAD's only as good as you are accurate. You know, all these things are,
Yes.
have to have a specificity, and I like precise work. I don't like sloppy work. So, you know, and as a designer, you should be precise in your thoughts. And sure, your workplace is sloppy, but I'm talking about, you know, the execution and the application of your ideas, of your documents. All those things become, ultimately, not to sound too hard, your contract, right? And it's really important that what you put out there, realizing that's your legacy. So whatever you build in this world, whatever you make in this world is part of your legacy. And paying attention to that and respecting that, I think, is really important. I wanted to talk about that a little bit, but I also wanted to say my favorite current tool is my iPad Pro.
Oh my God, mine too.
Because I can take my presentation, I can sketch on it, I can move things around, I can cut, I can clip, I can Photoshop, I can AutoCAD, I can basically do everything I want to do and have a conversation with my client or my team member or my consultant and move things around and work them out. And it's just powerful if you can have the hand and the document and the imagery all be malleable for you. So plus I'm archaic, right? So for me to learn Rhino is not going to happen. SketchUp, yes. You know, Revit a little bit, but my iPad Pro saves me every time.
I also
I like,
Oh, sorry. The last thing I would say is if you do work for a firm and they have reps coming in to talk about products, don't just go for like the cheese. You know, like go and ask those people all the questions, because as you start writing like specifications and you start putting notes on your drawings and you start doing all of that, it's such a gold star to be able to know like how to specify the right freaking grout. Like, so, like being able to say like, this is the kind of grout I want, this is how I like it, this is the color I need, is actually a huge benefit to clients. And those reps are such a wealth of knowledge. And I think, like, I don't know, I was always really into grilling them and getting a ton of information, and that was really valuable. So that's not a tool, but that's like a skill that people will appreciate. And taking good notes, you know, noting your plans properly, and good logic is important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to just thank you all. We're at time, so I know that we need to let everybody go. I want to thank the four of you for such an excellent conversation. I mean, I think it makes me feel really privileged to be part of the CCA community. I'm an instructor, not a grad, but I am so happy to hear from all of you. Such excellent advice, such great stories, and I so appreciate you all sharing today. So thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining.
I
Thanks for
agree with
having
you
us.
as well. Thank you all
Thanks so
for
much
for
for
today and for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Meet all of you.